Hi guys, this is Lucifer. Welcome to Raid Shadow Legends. Guys, this is the first time I'm recording in English, so I'm sorry if I have some language issues during the video. So, let's get to it. First of all, let's fuse this dude. Okay. One villager. Second one. The third. And the fourth fuse. Okay, that's for that. So, today I will talk about the top 3 epics in every faction. So, let's start with Bannerlords. So, from Bannerlords, my first pick will be Archmage Helmet. He is the best epic in this faction. In his A1, attacks one enemy, fills this champion's turn meter by 10%, fills the turn meter by 20% if this attack is critical. That's one thing. The second is this amazing stun. Attacks one enemy, also attacks all other enemies if this attack is critical. The second hit has a 50% chance of placing stun, which goes to 75% when it's booked. It's amazing. And the A3 places a 30% increased speed and a 30% increased crit rate buff and a 30% increased crit damage buff. His passive, immune to turn meter decreasing effects. He is great. everywhere in the game. So my second pick will be Stag Knight. Stag Knight is also one of the best epics, an old school champion, and he's the mascot of our clan. So in his A1, attacks one enemy 2 times, each hit has a 30% chance of placing a decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. And his A2, this is the thing, this is the best, attacks all enemies, has a 95% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff and a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. And his passive, bam. His reviews show you that he's amazing. So my third pick will be Ursala. Ursala has on a F3 the best revive. Not only in epics, I think it's the best revive in entire game. So she revives all the allies with 75% HP, then fills the turn meter by 50%, also places a 60% increased defense, and a 25% straight, on all enemies for 3 turns, and it's a 5 turns cooldown. On her A2, attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns, also places a 50% increased attack on all allies. And her A1 attacks one enemy, has a 55% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 10%. So she is amazing, guys. So let's go to the High Elves. So my first pick will be a Royal Guard. A Royal Guard is one of the best epics in this game. He is great in the Hydra. He is amazing for the speedruns in the Fire Knight, and that's because he's A2. When attacks all enemies, damage increases according to enemy max HP. His damage is based on attack and enemy max HP. His A3 is a 4-time hitter, and it's with a decreased speed, which is great for the Fire Knight. And his A1 attacks one enemy, has a 65% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense for 2 turns. So my second pick will be, I think, Vergis. Vergis is an old school champion. It's a long time he was one of the metas in Classic Arena because of his passive. Places shield shield buff on this champion equal to 10% of their max HP for 2 turns whenever this champion loses 10% or more of their max HP. And his active effect is places a 15% continuous heal buff on this champion for 2 turns every time their HP drops below 50%. His A1 attacks one enemy, has a 40% when booked 50% chance of placing a 30% reflect damage on a random ally for 2 turns, and his A2, look at all these buffs. Ally protection, continuous heal, increased speed, reflect damage, increased defense. For today I'm using him only on Scarab, but this is the place where he can shine today. So my third pick will be, I think, Battle Sage. Battle Sage is a great addition to the Hydra. Her A1 attacks all enemies, so she is great when you're not using her in Hydra. She will be great on Stunset, but in Hydra you want some damage potential from her. So the A2 places a 50% increased attack on all enemies for 2 turns, then removes all debuffs on all allies. These buffs cannot be removed, which is great. And her A3 places a revive on the buff on the target ally for 2 turns. The ally will instantly revive if killed. So this is on a 4th cooldown and it's a great ability. So that's all for the High Elves. Let's get to the Sacred Order. So my first pick will be Mordecai. Mordecai, because of his A3, which brings you the HP burn. He is one of the best for the Spider 21 to 25. He is in my Spider 25 speed team. His A1 attacks one enemy, has a 45% chance of decreasing target exterminator by 10%. This is great. His A2 has a 100% chance of decreasing the Terminator all enemies by 15%. Fills the Terminator all allies by 15%. So he's a great champ. And as you can see, you don't need to get him to level 60. So my second pick will be Fenex. Fenex, he's great in Faction Wars. He's great in the Ice Golem because of his A1. Attacks one enemy, places an extra hit if the target has any debuffs. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived, which is great in Ice Golem. His A2 brings both buffs and both active skills, and his A3 brings Deacon's defense and Deacon's speed. So my third pick will be Deacon Armstrong. He's a huge champ. His A1 brings you Leech. His A2 decreases defense, it's an AoE on a 30 cooldown. And his A3 fills the turn meter for all allies by 15% and decreases the turn meter for enemies by 15%, grants him an extra turn. And his aura is almost great, always great. Increase ally speed in all battles by 19%. So that's the three, but I need to mention Inquisitor Shamael, who is great for Hydra, the first rotation, because of this passive. And the second bonus mention is Godseeker Energy. She's great everywhere because of this passive and the revive and the A2, which is attacks all enemies, heal all allies by 15% of their max HP, then decreases the duration of all buffs on all enemies by 1 turn, and increases the duration of all buffs by all allies by 1 turn. So I'm preparing a video on her in the clan boss. It will be Infinite Shield team, so stay tuned. That's all for the Sacred Order. Let's go to Barbarians. So from Barbarians, I think my first pick will be Farakin the Fat. He's the best ally attack champ in the entire game. I'm using him in my clan boss team, beating the Ultra Nightmare clan boss for 2 keys. What is great about him, his A3 brings increased crit damage, increased crit rate on all allies except his champion for 3 turns. Then all allies except his champion will attack one target enemy, which is great. His A2 brings HP burn and poisons. It's amazing for the clan boss. And his A1 brings decreased defense. His passive only reflects. That's useful. So my second pick will be Skytouch Shaman. She is amazing in the Doom Tower. One of the best healers there from the epic category. So her A1 attacks all enemies, healed by 15% of the damage inflicted if this champion has less than 15 sorry 50% HP. Boost this champion's turn meter by 20% instead if the champion has 50% HP or higher. So that was the A1. Her A2 removes all debuffs from all allies, so clans, then places a block buff debuff and a revive Undead on all allies for 2 turns. It's amazing skill if she's have high speed. And her passive, I don't like her passive, but it's what it is. Damages this champion by 10% of their max HP at the start of each turn. Heals all allies except this champion equal to the half of the lost HP. Places a 30% decreased speed debuff on this champion for 1 turn at the start of each turn. Also has a 50% chance of placing fear debuff on this champion for 1 turn. Okay, that was it. And the third pick will be Armina. So I'm using her for today only in Faction Wars, I think, but she's great. For Epic, she's great. So her A1 brings stun, her A2 is a AoE, decreases defense, her A3 brings decreases the turn meter of all enemies by 20%, and has a 100% chance of placing stun for 1 turn on enemies who have their turn meter fully depleted. Her passive fill this champion's turn meter by 10% each time an enemy receives a stun. So she is amazing. That's all for this faction. Let's go to the Ogre tribes. So from the Ogre tribes, there are lots of great epic champions, but my first pick will be Maniter. You know guys why? Because of his A3, which brings unkillable and block debuffs. He is almost every unkillable clan boss composition because he's amazing. Need to mention his A1, which brings decreased attack, and in the clan boss you don't care about his A2, but in the other locations, if he have enough accuracy, attacks one enemy, fully depletes the target's turn meter, which is great. Not in clan boss, but it's great everywhere else. So he was my first pick. The second one I think will be Willowgreen. Willowgreen got a nerf, but for he's great. He's like a mini Bad Alcazar, and he is in my speed teams in the Ice Golem and the Dragon. Also with Bad Alcazar, because of the skill, places two 5% poison debuffs on all enemies for 2 turns. Also places a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns, which is great. His A3 removes all debuffs from an ally, then heals them by 40% of the max HP, and his A1 brings poisons. That was my second, and Yugo is great, but I think I will go with Skullcrusher. Skullcrusher because of his A2, which brings counter attack. There's only a few champions, guys, in this game. It have only skill, the counter attack. I used him a long time ago in Clan Boss. Now I'm using him only in Faction Wars, but he is great. And his A1 brings heal reduction, plus his passive decreases the duration of all debuffs on this champion by 1 turn at the start of each turn. That's why he was a long time ago my stun target. So that was the Ogni tribes, and now we can move to Lizardmen. From Lizardmen, my number one, and he is great. He's underrated, but he's great. Is Broadmaw. I've used him lots of times. I don't even know how much Broadmouse I had in this account, but I have, I think, one on 60 and one on 50 because of the faction wars. This skill is amazing for the faction wars. Everybody's 2 random allies with 25% HP and placing block damage. It's great, but he has a little CC on his A1, which brings you freeze, and on his A2 he's bringing increasing crit rate and increasing speed. The second one, I think I will choose Skeptics. He is also in my faction wars team. His A1 brings you decreased speed. His A2 is an AoE and has a 100% chance of stealing one random buff from each enemy. His A3 is why I used him in Faction Wars. He has a cleanse and placing block debuffs and a shield. His passive is also great, places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn whenever the HP drops below 30%. Okay, and the third pick is one champion I don't have, but I think he's amazing. Basilisk brings you an increased attack on the A1. It's an AoE. On the A2 brings you stun. But what is great about him is his passive, which revives him with 30% HP when killed and places a bulk damage buff for 1 turn. So that was the Lizardmen. Let's go to Skinwalkers. So from Skinwalkers, my number 1 will be Basher. He's a great champ. On his A3, it's a 4-hitter at random, but it's a 4-hitter. Brings you block buffs. His A2 is amazing. It's an AoE that increases the cooldown of all of target's skills by 2 turns. And his A1 brings weaken. He's amazing in Faction Wars, guys. So use him if you have him. So my second will be Feign. Feign is amazing in the clan boss in some unkillable compositions. On her A1 is a 2-time hitter. On her A3 she brings you decreased attack and poisons, which is great for the clan boss. And her A3 brings you decreased defense and a beacon in 1 skill on a 4-turn cooldown, so she is amazing. Almost everywhere, but first of all in unkillable compositions. So my third pick will be Hoforis. He is the only reviver I think in this faction, but he is amazing in Faction Wars because of this revive, which brings you strengthen. You need to build him with lots of HP and speed, guys. Don't forget that. So that's all for the Skinwalkers. Let's go to the Orcs. So from the Orcs, I'm choosing maybe the most wanted champion in the entire game on every account, and it's here because of her A3, which removes all buffs from all allies and all enemies and then attacks all enemies. She is great. It's amazing champion. Remember, you need 100% crit rate and as much crit damage as it's possible. The best way is build her in Savage Gear. You don't care about the A1, you don't care about the A2, you just care about the A3, which is the best skill in the entire game and allows you the speedruns everywhere. Doom Tower, dungeons, everywhere. She is amazing. So my second pick will be Duck. Duck is something like a Stag Knight. On his A1 brings decreased accuracy. On his A2, which is an AoE, brings you decreased attack and decreased defense. And his A3 brings you provoke, unkillable, and reflect damage. So my third pick will be Sandlash Survivor. Sandlash Survivor because I'm preparing a video on her. The Infinity Shield team in Clan Boss. It's because her A2, which attacks all enemies, decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn, and increasing the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn. Her passive places an ally protection on allies for 2 turns. When an ally HP drops below 50%, also places a block damage buff on the champion for 1 turn, and you don't care about her A1. Okay, it's a double hitter and gives you provoke, but she's amazing because of her A2. So that was the Orcs, and now we can continue to Demon Spawn. From Demon Spawn, my first pick will be Allure. Allure is in my speed team in the Feign Knight. It's because of her A1, which is a triple hitter, and decreases the target's turn meter by 25% on each critical hit. So you need to build her in the 100% crit rate. Her A2 has a use, but it's not so important like the A1. The A2 attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a chance of a little decreased defense and sleep the entire team. And her A3, which is skipped in my team, attacks one enemy, has a extra 30% chance of critical hit, will ignore 50% of the target's defense. She is amazing. My second pick will be Achak. Achak because of his freeze. He's in my speed team in Spider 25 because of this skill, which freezes the entire Spiderlings and brings you some HP burn. The A2 places a block debuff buff on a life for 1 turn and 25% strengthen for 2 turns. And her A1 attacks one enemy, 30% chance of decreasing the duration of one random buff. Okay, I don't know that. But he is amazing because he's A3. So my third pick will be the one and only Magnar. He is amazing. He hits like a truck, he hits like Tranda because of this skill. Attacks all enemies, places an extra hit on enemies without HP burn, so you need to not have that HP burn, of course. The A1 brings you decreased defense. The A3, I think I never used it A3, only his A2. And the passive, this champion is used by 1% of the max HP every time anyone in the battle takes damage from HP burn debuff. So that was the demon spawn. Let's go to the undead. So the undead hordes have lots of great epic champions, but my first pick will be Vogot. He is amazing in the classic arena and in 3v3. You need to build him with lots of HP. The A1 is a triple hitter, okay, you don't care about that. The A2 is what is good about him. It's an AoE which brings you decreased attack and provoke, but the best things on his kit is his passives. The first passive, whenever the champion is attacked, heals all allies by 50% of the damage received. Only heals by 25% if the damage received from boss attacks. This champion only receives half, blah blah blah. That was the first passive, and the second passive allows you to slowly heal yourself or your team. That was him. The second will be Dark Elhain. Dark Elhain is a great epic nuker. She doesn't hit that hard like Magnar, but she is amazing. on her A1, attacks one enemy, decreases target max HP by 30% of the damage inflicted. We don't care. But her A2 places a 50% increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns. Then attacks all enemies, so it's an AoE. Has a 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuffs for 2 turns. But what is amazing about her passives. The first passive, Lethal Winter, fills this champion's turn meter by 25% and instantly activates that Majesty, which is her A2. Whenever the champion or an ally receives a freeze, so she can counter torments. And her second passive instantly removes any freeze debuffs on this champion and replace them with increased crit rate, increased crit damage, and mini straighten. Whenever an enemy places a freeze debuff on this champion, she's amazing. The third pick, I want to mention Husk because he's great in the Hydra, but I need to go with Seeker. Seeker is amazing old school champion, mostly known in the Bat Eater composition, but he's great. A1 attacks one enemy 2 times, has a... I don't know, I don't want to... so he's using the provoke, but what she's amazing, feels the A2, hey, feels the turn meter of all allies by 30%, places a 50% increased attack on all allies for 2 turns and grants him an extra turn. And his passive is on a 5-turn cooldown, heals this champion by 20% and places a 60% increased defense on all allies by 2 turns when is hit with a critical hit. So that's about the Undead Hordes. Let's go to the Dark Elves. So from the Dark Elves, my first pick must be Madame Ceres. She is amazing. You need to build her speedy and very, very high accuracy, because of this A3, which removes all buffs from all enemies and replaces them with decreased defense and decreased attack. The A2 attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of stealing one random buff from each target, and places a block debuff on all allies for 2 turns. Also places a True Fear debuff for 1 turn on enemies who have buff stolen. And her A1 brings you the fear. The passive is also useful. Place shield buff on this champion equal to 10% of their max HP at the start of each turn. When attacked while under shield buff, has a 35% chance of placing fear debuff on the attacker by 1 turn. So my third will be Ryan. Ryan, because of his or her A2, which is a cleanse. Oh, no cleanse, sorry, a stripper. He has a 100% chance of removing all buffs from all enemies. Also has a 100% chance of placing 25% weaken on all enemies for 2 turns. And plus, she has this amazing revive of the ally with 50%, then fills their turn meter by 50%. Will then also place a block debuff buff on them by 2 turns. And if you have on the same team Akot or Urost, she revives them instead. And the A1 brings you block buffs. So that was the Dark Elves. Let's go to Knight Remnants. So from the Knight Remnants, my first one will be Miscreated Monster. Miscreated Monster because he's amazing in faction wars. A long time ago, when I don't have the speed teams, I used him in Spider. Because of the skill, they too attacks all enemies, has a 50% chance of placing stun debuff by one turn, but places a shield buff on all allies for 3 turns equal to 25% of the damage inflicted. So it's a massive shield in the Spider. His A1 brings you stun and decreased defense. The A3 lets him heal himself. And the passive places a feed debuff on the attacker for one turn whenever an ally is attacked while under ally protection buff. So my second will be Doom Priest. She is the recommended champion for clearing the faction wars, one of them. And she's amazing because this passive, which heals all allies by 7.5% of the HP and removes one random debuff from them at the start of this champion's turn. So you need to build her fast, build her tanky to survive, and most likely in a relentless set. Okay, A1 attacks one enemy. If this attack is critical, place increased crit rate. And her A2 places increased attack on all allies for 2 turns. So my third pick is my most wanted champion from this faction, and it's Erector Red. She is great. On her A1 it brings you decreased attack. On her A2 heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. After healing, place perfect fail for 2 turns, all allies with full HP, and places a continuous heal buff for 1 turn instead on an allies with less than 100% HP. Her A3 revives a single ally with 60% HP and fills their turn meter by 60%, places a perfect veil on them for 3 turns. So her passive, whenever an ally under a veil or perfect veil buff gets a turn, heals them by 10% of their max HP, also increases the resistance of allies under veil and perfect veil by 50. She's great, and I don't have her. That was the Knight Remnants. Let's go to the Dwarfs. Sorry. So my first pick will be Geomancer, who is great in combos. Some of the teams. He is great in Hydra. Some of the rotations. On his A1 brings decreased accuracy. On his A2 removes all buffs from a target enemy, then attacks them, steals all buffs instead. If the target is under HP burn debuff placed by this champion, reduces the cooldown of Quicksand Grass by 2 turns. If your target is killed by this you don't care about this, but reduces the cooldown of this skill. Fully depletes the target's turn meter, fill this champion's turn meter by the moment the target loses, and has a 100% chance of placing an HP burn and a weaken debuff on the target for 3 turns. And his passive, this is the best part, decreases the damage all allies receive by 15%, and deflects the damage onto each enemy and HP burn debuff placed by this champion. If there are multiple champions on the team with this skill, only one will activate. Whenever this champion is attacked, deflects 30% of the damage instead. When deflecting damage on each enemy, it has a 30% chance of dealing additional damage equal to 3% of the target's max HP. He is amazing. He's great. My second pick will be Melga. Melga is a great addition to the dwarves. Uh, she's great in faction wars. She's so amazing. Uh, her A1 attacks one enemy and has the chance of removing one random debuff from a random ally. Her A2 brings you shield and continuous heal, and her A3 revives 2 random allies with 20% HP and 20% terminator. Also places a shield buff on the revived allies for 2 turns equal to 30% of their max HP. So my third will be my most wanted from this faction, and it's the Mita. The meta compositions on the clan boss are amazing, and I wish I could someday try them. So A1 attacks one enemy 2 times, place a shield buff for 2 turns equal to 10% of this champion's max HP on the ally with the lowest HP. Her A2 increases the duration of all allied buffs by 1 turn, then decreases the duration of all allied debuffs by 1 turn. Also heals all allies by 2.5% of their max HP, heals by a further 2.5% max HP for each turn added to the removed from the duration of buffs and debuffs by this skill, and her A3 places a block damage buff on all allies by 1 turn, and a continuous heal on all allies for 2 turns. So I want her so badly, but that was the dwarf guys, and let's move on to the Shadowkins, and we are finishing now. From this faction, my first pick will be Toraji. Toraji brings you Deacon's attack on the A1, an AoE provoke on the A2, ally protection shield and reflect damage on the A3, and his passive when attacked has a 50% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on the attacker for 2 turns across once per hit. So he is great in faction wars in some of the clan boss teams. My second pick will be Burangiri. He has a proc on his A1, an AoE stun on his A2, strengthen and shield on the A3, and heals this champion by 50% of the max HP whenever an ally or an enemy dies on the passive. I used him in only in faction wars, but he is great there because of this stun. And my last pick will be my most wanted from this faction, and it's who else? Gembo. Gembo is a great nuker. On his A1 attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit steals increased attacks buff. Each hit also has a 50% chance of stealing one random buff. Sorry. His A2 is an AoE, has a 100% chance of decreasing the duration of all buffs by 1 turn. This effect cannot be resisted on critical hits. His A3 places an increased crit rate, increased crit damage on this champion for 3 turns and grants him an extra turn. So you go with the A3, then nuke the team with the A2. And his passive, He is immune to decreased attack. Debuffs will ignore unkillable buffs when attacking under an increased attack buff. So he is great. So that's all, guys. I hope you like this video, and if you liked it, don't forget to push that like button, subscribe to this channel, and of course take care and see you soon on the next video.